Hi guys, how's it going? Back with another video of an update of my life, so stay tuned. So in this video vlog, I would like to update you guys on what has happened throughout the past week. Last Sunday, me and my friends went longboarding, and I would like to show you some footage of that. And also last week, I had issues during work, which I'd like to talk about. In the next couple of minutes, you'll be seeing the footage of me longboarding, and if you want to skip to the part where I talk about my challenges at work, then here is the timestamp on when that starts. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you in a bit. Guys, I'm working with some friends. Hey friends. Hey everyone. Woo!
That started from about 5 years ago.
Not the skateboard.
No, clearly not.
The river, whatever. If we go through Fitzroy Gardens and see those paths,
Yeah,
those parks there have some real nice hills,
yeah.
and most of them will be downhill towards the river. So
Okay.
if we go,
Yeah, and like that's a route anyway. That's just
Yeah.
a main busy road.
what would you do with Saudi? No, I'm
Oh, is it a touch screen? Oh,
no. The buttons are on the back.
27. I still got a lot. 27.4 volts.
Yeah,
What's the max volts?
30 volts.
Oh, okay.
And minimum volts is like 22.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Still got a lot.
You guys coming?
Yeah, I'm just taking a video. Getting a free lift. Free lift up.
Tom Cruise is taller than me, man. Same height. 5'7".
Hi guys, I just want to update you guys on what happened at work. Nothing bad or anything, but it's just a challenge that I faced during when I was programming. Now, you know when I told you guys that I'm basically working on the back end and we're developing an IoT based system, right? So the issue that I had was something to do with multi-threading. So basically what I was writing was a thread within a thread, and it would work fine when running normally, right? When executed, it would run normally, right? But then when you're trying to terminate it, sometimes you get into these weird situations where the program just crashes. I'm not an expert at multi-threading, and you know, I'm still sort of learning it as I go. So I try my best to figure out things, and I wouldn't call myself an expert programmer. Most programmers have this thing called what was it? It was in my head. Oh no, I lost it. Finally it came to my head. Yeah, okay. So that word I was thinking of, imposter syndrome. So generally, a lot of the times developers get stumped on certain situations and they think that they're not good enough because they get stuck on a problem and nothing good is coming out of it, and it takes hours and hours and hours to solve that problem. But when they solve it, it feels really good because they solved it. But while they're solving it, they feel anxious because they're like, oh, I've been programming this long and I still can't solve this problem. But that's just a natural process, because in programming things change all the time, right? You learn new things and technology changes and updates every time, so you're always going to be in a constant state of learning, and you're always going to be in a constant state of starting from scratch and starting from the bottom. Once you reach a top of a section, there's always going to be that next level up, and you'll always be humbled by that next level up because, you know, it's so much bigger than what you're working on now. So that's basically what I felt this week when working on multi-threading issues. Basically, that multi-threading issue was, so there was a user interface where the user will input data, right? And because we're using C++, there's a lot of things that we had to program manually, right? So the user has to input data into the form, right? And then there's a lot of things that happen in the background. There has to be verification. The data in the background synchronizes with a system that's connected to it. So it's another module, right? Electronic module that synchronizes data between the database and that module, right? So the system itself, when the user inputs entries, right, there's a constant update that needs to happen every couple of seconds because the system is doing certain functions that update, so it has to update the database, right? So to reduce the amount of traffic on the network, right, you can't just keep spamming the information, and you have to actually have a timer, right? But the timer that I was using was the Qt timer event, right? And that timer event was a low-level timer event that, for some reason, if you created a timer event in a class and for some reason when you try to delete it, at some points it would still keep running. So the issue is it runs perfectly fine when you open the user interface. So the user interface that I'm talking about is a nested user interface. So when you open up the nested user interface from a UI button, right, it opens up, and then the timer event runs to update the data from the module to the database and updates the UI. And then what happens is when you close that, right, all the objects are deleted. So you delete all the objects, but the issue is the timer event, even if for some reason a lot of people had this issue, and I was reading some forums and they're saying that, you know, the timer events in Qt had this issue where even though they've stopped the timer, it would still call the timer event with that specific ID assigned to that event that they were using in that object that they wanted to get deleted. Okay, so now they delete that object and my code is still having that issue. So it still has that issue where the low-level timer is basically still calling the timer to invoke the function of the updating for that UI and the database. But the problem is it works when it's open, but when you close it, the objects are deleted. So the timer event is trying to call certain functions with objects that don't exist anymore, right? So what I had to do was I ended up just making my own custom timer and putting that in a separate thread, a nested thread. So the reason why I did nested threads was because, so you've got the UI, right? Now there's this thing called MVC, Model View Controller, but then if you code all the database code on the view layer, right? If you code the database CRUD operations on the view, if you have, say, hundreds or thousands of data that's being accessed constantly, right? Then what will happen is once you're trying to access the data from the database, while it's being accessed, the UI will actually freeze because it's happening on the same thread. So the thing is, you have to separate the database, you have to separate the functions to acquire data from the database so that that runs separately from the UI. So the UI is still dynamic, it's still functional, right? So the database is running on a separate thread. And then from that, another thread, there's a timer, my custom timer class. There's this huge dynamic of, you know, multi-threading, like threads communicating with threads, and the issues where you can get race conditions and you can get deadlocks and all that. There's good practices with multi-threading. You use mutex, you lock the resource. When you're using a resource with one thread, you have to lock it before you use it, because if you don't lock it, then two threads could be using that one resource at the same time, right? It becomes more complicated as you're dealing with more threads. I'm not an expert with threads, but I'm still getting my head around that. Now I fixed all that, right? So now when you close the window, because I'm using a custom timer, now the timer events are no longer called after the window, the UI is closed and all the objects are deleted, because since I created a custom timer object, I can now delete that timer object and it will no longer invoke those functions of an unexisting object, right? So I fixed that, but now I'm having issues with the database QSQL database class, because that's a built-in library of Qt, but that's a static library, so I'm not sure exactly how. I'll have to look into how to use threads with static variables or static classes, but yeah, I'm still looking into that and I'm going to try to fix that. So that was basically what has happened at work, and that's just a small part of what we're dealing with. It's just to give you guys a picture of what I'm working with. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed that. That's my update from work. So yeah, catch you guys in the next video.